Hello and welcome to a Q&A for Working Man. My name is Lily Rodriguez. I'm the Artistic Director of the Palm Springs Film Society, and I'm joined by some very, very special guests. We have writer-director of Working Man, Robert Gerety. We have cast members Peter Gerety, Talia Shire, and Billy Brown, and producers Lovell and Clark Peterson. Thank you all so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for sharing this really wonderful, timely, accidentally timely, I think, film. Robert, I wonder if you could take us back to the very beginning and tell us a little bit about where the story comes from. Was there a person in particular who set you off into telling this, a moment, something you read?
Yeah, it was actually, it originated about 10 years ago, just on the heels of the 2008 recession, really. I think I wrote the first draft in 2009, 2010, with no idea where we'd end up now, of course, with the pandemic and all. But my father had brought me a newspaper article. It was about a factory that around the areas where I grew up in the Midwest, around the Mississippi river towns and so forth. It was a factory that was considering reopening after many years of being shuttered. It was a place where my mother had actually worked as a teenager, a factory. And just out of that, I started thinking about what if a factory worker continued to go back to that plant and work even after it had closed down. And just the idea grew from there. And also, honestly, I was kind of at a crossroads with my career. I was thinking about this the other day, that maybe I'm a little bit like this main character himself, in that I knew this really wasn't going to be a studio film necessarily, but I started writing it on spec, with no, just going to work every day, one foot in front of the other, just like Peter Gerety's character, and with the idea that maybe there'd be something worthwhile at the end of the story. And here we are, a decade later, in the most strange of times, but fitting times, I think.
Mm-hmm. And Clark and Lovell, how early in the development of this script did you all get involved?
Well, I got involved pretty early on, probably like 8 years ago, or I don't know, how long ago was it, Bob? Actually, it has to be older than that, because
yeah, decade.
My son is 9. Yeah, so I was, I guess, there pretty early on, 10 years ago, and somebody said, "Hey, I read this script. Is a writer director who may need a producer," and they told me what it was about. And the moment I heard what the story was, I just said, "Wow, I have to read this." And then I read it, and I was like, "Wow, I have to be a part of this." And so Bob and I, I just said, "Hey, Bob, I'd love to help you. I don't know how we do this or where we do this, but I think it's an important story, and so let's try to do it." And so Bob just wrote a number of drafts, and we kept working it and massaging it, and lo and behold, overnight we made the movie. So
yeah. Oh well, yeah. No, it was funny, because the first time I read the script, I was looking back at this in my email the other day, because I started my career in the entertainment industry as Clark's intern 10 years ago, in a summer between years at grad school, and then started working for Clark full-time as his assistant when I graduated. And I read the script for the first time then, and then after I left, Clark went off on my own and was doing my own kind of freelance work. And in 2018, Clark reached out to me and said, "Hey, do you remember Working Man?" I was like, "Of course I remember Working Man. I loved Working Man. It was great. It's like, we're finally making it. Can you come to Chicago and be on the producing team?" And so at Clark and Bob's invitation, myself and Maya Amel, our other wonderful producer, kind of leapt straight into the deep end of the pool and moved to Chicago with about a month and a half's notice. And we were rooming with Bob in the middle of the coldest April that Chicago had seen since the 1800s, and never looked back.
Wow. I think one of the things that I really love about the cast, well, the movie itself, is how much of it, at least initially, is told just through the visuals of it. It's very little dialogue, and there's a lot of physicality also in all of the characters. And Peter, I'd like to start off with you and just get a sense of, was there a hook to the character that kind of sent you on a process of exploring that character? And what was it about him that drew you to tell his story?
Well, I have a number of things I would answer with that, but one thing I'd like to ask Bob a question. Did you just think, what if some guy just continued to go back to his factory, or did you actually hear tell of a real person who continued to go back to his factory?
No,
that was just out of your imagination?
yeah, that was a what if. It was
Okay,
when
well
my
then
dad,
I lied to somebody the other day because I said that you knew somebody who was going back to their
You won't tell.
conversation. Yeah, right. I just was very attracted to the story and the character because I'm very much kind of at my time of life anyway. I'm very kind of focused on the idea of what is the middle of anything? What is the middle of your life? What is the middle of a moment on the stage, or the middle of because I'm a believer that we never are at the very beginning and we're never at the very end. There's something about a character like Allery, who all of the time that he's walking back and forth, it's not a sense of desperation. I never think. I just always think that he's going through these motions because he knows something is going to happen. He just doesn't know what yet. I know something's going to happen with my life. I just don't know what yet. And I'm getting into the later stages of it here, but I don't know what the hell is going to happen, what's going to come down the road. And I have connections with everybody on this, everybody here, all these little faces in the little boxes. Like Lovell and I worked around each other years ago in Providence, Rhode Island, fraternity rep, and I don't have personal connections with Billy, but Viola Davis, who worked with Billy, I worked with her at Trinity Rep years and years ago. I've been in love with Talia Shire forever, just forever. And, so you just don't know what's going to happen in your life. And you read this story, The Working Man, and there's a moment early on in the story where after they've received their final check and they're, okay, it's over, it's ended. And Allery is sitting in front of his television set, and you just can see this moment where he says, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm not going to sit in front of the television set, because that's death. So he gets up and starts walking, and you don't know what's going to come of it. And this kind of thing happens with Billy, Walter, Billy's character, Walter, like gives me the keys to something. And Iola, my wife, tells me she's not going to put up with this anymore. And there are these moments of where doors open, and you just don't know what's going to happen when those doors open. And so you walk through. And this is a long-winded answer to what attracted me to it. But I think what attracted me to it is the connections with my own life. I think that is kind of what attracts actors to characters. It's I don't know what's going to happen. Allery didn't know what's going to happen. He can't see. He's not God. He can't see down the road. He's not a clairvoyant. But something's going to happen. And that's what just fascinated me about it.
You mentioned something that I find really interesting, this being really the middle. It's not really the end of something, and it's the beginning of something. And I know the film's about someone who loses their job, but I'm sure that a lot of people who go into retirement have that same identity crisis, right? So that is interesting. I hadn't really thought about that.
I got an email just yesterday from a wonderful actor, a woman in New York, And she was just thrilled with Working Man, and she belongs to a large group of people. And she says, I'm going to tell everybody to watch this. And it is because she's going through the same thing. We're all going through the same thing. We don't know what the hell's going to happen with this pandemic. Great, there's vaccines on the horizon. Yeah, sure. But meanwhile, you got to figure out how to live your life. You got to, you got to put one foot in front of the other and keep walking down that road. And that's what excited her about it. That was what was exciting to her about it. She's got a little baby, she's got a husband, she's got a career that's iffy because of all of this crap that we're going through. So many talented people, so many wonderful working people, and they don't know the answer. They don't know, and that was what attracted her to it. Right. She said, these guys don't know what's going to happen. Iola doesn't know what's going to happen. Walter doesn't know what's going to happen. Hillary doesn't know what's going to happen. Nobody in America knows what's going to happen. And then when you think about it, nobody in the world knows what's going to happen. It's international. It's everywhere. It's in Tibet, for God's sakes. So nobody knows what's going to happen. And I think that that's part of the magic of Working Man.
Talia, your character, Iola, she's really, I love her. She's really kind of, the one who has it the most figured out. And I'd love to talk about your.
Don't say anything, Peter. Don't say a thing. Okay.
What attracted you to portraying Iola? And also, I'd like to talk about the relationship between Iola and Ellery. It feels so lived in and natural, and I think a big part of that is also just the location. That house feels like a very real house. And I'd like to talk about the process of you two creating that character and that relationship.
Well, I mean, I have to say, the reason you feel it lived in is the intimacy that I think Peter and I were able to really create. Even though there was a spiritual elephant in that room, we went around it, we still, as actors, and I think, Peter, I know you feel this way, but we had this great regard and respect for one another. So there was that intimacy. What attracted me, honestly, Clark has been a friend for 20 years, and he's a man of great good taste. He has an ability to recognize something on the page. You'll feel that term, on the page. Shakespeare's great on the page. And Robert Gerety, you're great on the page. There was something kind of nuts about it because it had a rhythm. Clark, we talked about that rhythm, that walk of Peter's, which was purgatorial and mysterious. But I was thinking about this the other day. Forgive me what I'm about to say. Guys, don't be offended with what I'm going to say, right? Are you, Peter? But a woman, in a way, when your children are grown as a woman, you know what it is to be out of work. Did I say anything too terrible there?
I think you said something really insightful, yeah.
I know fathers feel that way, but there is a labor involved in that newborn, and so and I was just thinking about that. My God, I'm sort of out of work as a mother. The empty nest is a factory of sorts, but I felt it was beautiful on the page, and then as my beautiful cast came in, I mean, Peter, the best. You might be the best husband I've ever had, but. And then Billy came in, and Billy flew in, and I always say he was an angel. The role is an angel, so Billy flew in, and I don't think he took a plane. So, I mean, there was this glorious sense of ensemble.
Billy, your character, since we're on Billy, your character is such a force on screen, and he really goes through, forgive the cliche, but a roller coaster of emotions. And I'd like to know your process on that. And it also, Billy's character brings this whole new dimension to the story that's also already there. could you talk about finding your character, any kind of research you did around, if you did any?
Again, like Talia and Peter said, Bob put it on the page. You know, the rhythms, the flow,
You did.
all those intangibles that any reader or viewer of a finished project looks for, you know, inherently in it. It was already there on the page, so it's just a matter of utilizing the tools Bob set forth, you know, at our feet, so to speak. And talking with Bob was also helpful. You know, we spoke probably 2 hours before I even decided to do the project. Bob had sent a beautiful palette of imagery of how Orange was going to look and feel, and combined with the words on the page, that gave me a greater sense of who Walt Brewer was in the tapestry of Orange, his new place of only 8 months, really. But not knowing why he was doing what he was doing, to Peter's point. I don't think Walt Brewer really knew what he was doing moment to moment. He had a semblance of an idea, and he was motivated, highly motivated to do something, but didn't really know where it would take him, and ultimately the friendship that would come out of it. So reading, knowing more than Walt Brewer did, and ultimately our final moment with myself and Pete, it encapsulates everything that all that journey that we had gone through and what we had brought from it, you know, in the most positive of ways. You know, there's a friend of mine I went to college with who had a similar, I guess, bipolar type 1 disorder. And I was with him at some very salient moments. I mean, searing, if you will, and watched how it, you know, broke apart his family unit, and ultimately tested our friendship, and then really changed the course of his life beyond which his parents could have ever, you know, foreseen. You know, his sister, you know, the guys that I was tight with and he was tight with. So, you know, I was able to draw from that as a firsthand experience. So, you know, those moments they're very specific. When you see them firsthand, at the time I didn't recognize what they were. I didn't really know why he was doing and saying what he was doing. It just seemed very wild and erratic. But yet, some of it made sense, and I almost bought into many of the things that I saw and he told me. Years later, I recognized, yeah, there was some very real, you know, psychological manifestations happening. So that did help with Walter Brewer and Walter's development, again, combined with what Bob had already beautifully put down.
And Robert, I'd love to hear your thoughts on how, you know, coming up with all of the themes and working them in together so seamlessly. I think that's part of what makes the film seem so relevant and urgent. That balance of telling. It's a movie about giving dignity to these characters who don't know, you know, aren't used to getting it. People who are out of work, people who struggle with mental health. And I'd love to get your thoughts on that. You know, how the script kind of evolved and incorporated all these elements.
Yeah, well, it did evolve into really a story that was originally, again, about more the working element, right, and how much we need work, and what a loss of a factory means to a town or a job, loss of a job to a worker. But as Billy was just talking about, when I started thinking about those things that would bring these characters together, Billy's character with Talia and Peter's, I started to draw, like Billy did, from my own personal experience and family experience, where I lost a very close cousin of mine. He took his life because he was in those days he would have been diagnosed as manic depressive. A lot of people would characterize that as bipolar now. So I talked to my surviving cousin and my aunt, and talked to them about the idea of bringing this, the issue of mental illness into this story, because I thought it was relevant to what these characters were going through, and I even hesitate to talk about it in too many venues, because it just, unless it comes up like this more organically, because you don't want to exploit, or I don't know, make it seem anything than what it was, other than just this is kind of an homage to this cousin of mine who was really I idolized him. He was a really creative person, brilliant person, much like Billy's character, great, enthusiastic intelligence. And when things would go awry with him, so many of these conversations that you hear in the film would kind of relate back to that person. And even there's a really powerful scene, I think, that I'm really proud of with Patrice McLean in the diner with Peter, where she's talking about, it's Billy's former wife, and without giving too much away, so much of what she said came from conversations I had with family members, and just how the character of Walter Brewer was concerned about passing on genetically some of the psychological issues that he had to future generation, right? I mean, so much of that conversation came from real life. So I don't know, it did evolve a lot. It just, when I finally started to put all those pieces together, that's when the story seemed to work at its best. I mean, at least for me, that's when I felt like this is really the story that I wanted to tell. And I'm so glad that these three actors and Clark and Lovell came on board to help us tell it. So it connects, I think, with a lot of people, in that when we were on the film festival circuit, we were lucky enough to be doing that physically a year ago, and folks would come up afterwards, sometimes people who are bipolar themselves or had known people, like Billy, that had went through things. And that was really gratifying when they would say, this is really accurate. This is what it's like. And they appreciated that it wasn't criminalizing mental health, or I don't know, again, exploiting it. So yeah, it took a pretty serious turn. The script did, once I kind of landed on those ideas and married them together. So thank you for asking about that.
Yeah, it really it resonates. It really does, and it feels authentic. And in that same authenticity, I think the location just in itself, it's so specific. It's a universal story, but it's so specific to a place and to certain people. And Talia, you mentioned the rhythm of the film. So everything comes together so beautifully. I just want to talk about the look and creating this world. There's that wonderful score that plays in the beginning and throughout the film. That gray color palette, the city itself. Can we talk about the look and creating the world of Working Man?
Let me just say one thing about, I'm sure that Lovell and Clark have more to say about this, but these guys did an amazing job of pulling together a tremendous bunch of Chicago actors that also fleshed out those characters that Bobby created. But maybe somebody could talk about how you came about that, how you came about on those people.
Oh, of course. Well, no, Peter brings up a great point, because I do think to kind of marry that as well as the location point together, so much of the authenticity, I think, came from both our cast and the crew, who helped us also not just find the incredible factory, McRae Manufacturing, where we filmed, but also the houses where, I know you mentioned that earlier, Lily, where Peter and Talia's character lived, in Billy's house, which are very, very specific environments as well, and were in many ways kind of built from the ground up to sort of like in terms of set dressing to reveal who these people are. But to Peter's point, as far as the local cast, we had a wonderful casting company in Chicago called PR Casting, who I mean, Bob at one point said we could have cast the movie 10 times over because literally every actor they brought in, because the caliber of the local pool in Chicago is probably the best in the country because of all the theaters there. And so consequently, just every person who came in was just kind of a slam dunk. I mean, and so many kind of special discoveries that we were able to have, not just Patrice McLean, who Bob alluded to, but also B. Cordelia, who's a wonderful actor who plays the grocery store clerk, who's constantly interfacing with Talia, who's a trans actor, and it was her first film role. And so it was really thrilling for all of us to be able to give her her first film role, and also to kind of bring in another community that might not be expected to be depicted here. Because one of the things that Bob really pointed out to us whenever we were all in prep was that these towns and these factory communities are some of the most diverse workforces in the country. We watched multiple documentaries, including The Last Truck, that shows that like it's a very even ratio of men and women and very even ratios of different ethnicities. I think you know what a small Rust Belt town looks like, but your assumption that it looks one way, it doesn't mean that there aren't people of a variety of different ethnicities, that there aren't queer people there, trans people. Like I think, and I really commend Bob for really being very vigilant about making sure that that was reflected. But to the point about the factory, McCrae Manufacturing was opened about 70 years ago, and then quite sadly closed about a year after we wrapped production, and is scheduled for demolition, I believe, this month. And Bob has a lot of great insights into what's been going on with the factory ever since we departed, because I know he's very much in touch with Brian Miller, who was the manager there.
Yeah, it was another character of the film, right? This factory that we landed in, and we have a close relationship with the people there, and still do with Brian, the manager, who is kind of the last person standing as the factory closed down. And we got to visit with him at the tail end of a drive-in tour across the Rust Belt that we did this summer. So no, just to echo what Lovell said, it's Chicago, the people, the place. Sometimes circumstances work out, right? You get lucky, and we certainly did with the people and the locations where we were fortunate enough to land in Chicago.
But also, I just wanted to, you mentioned the score. The music, that melody is the sun, is the lost sun. And it's not synthesized, it's real, it's melodic. And I felt that was a significant part, and so beautifully done. Just wanted to bring that up. It's
David Gonzalez, great composer.
wonderful job.
And I was also just going to add that, Bob, I think from the beginning saw, and this, again, could sound cliche, but it's true. People have said, oh, the factory is like another character in the movie. And, from the very beginning, I think that was like the first character that Bob wanted to cast. And I remember, I think one of the very first things that we did was, Bob took off on a little road trip to go look at factories and try to find a place that could be right and find a community. And so I think when you talk about like how real it feels and how, gray it feels and all that, I mean, as great as our production designer was, a lot of that is just what's there, and it's just the real world. And, when you talk about how sort of the house feels very intimate and cozy and real, well, we didn't have the budget to build anything. So that, we just went to places that were real. And, I think that kind of lives on the screen.
And even the choices of the exteriors, Clark, that choice of the exterior in Joliet, of that bridge at night with that incredible lighting that Piero Lasso, our DP, just took advantage of. I particularly love those scenes. They're so different qualitatively. They're so color-wise, they're so different. They just bring an entirely different element to it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Robert, you mentioned a little bit earlier about doing a drive-in tour of the movie. Can you all talk a little bit about what this experience? I know you were lucky enough to have a physical run with the film, with festivals, but what has this new world right now? What's that been like, and touring a film, and what has and I really want to learn more about the drive-in experience in the Rust Belt.
Yeah, so this was really just, again, when you release a film right at the beginning of the pandemic. Our theatrical release was due to happen in March, and of course that's when all the theaters were closing down. So we quickly had to pivot to plan B and C and D and started to think about what else we could do to get the movie seen. Of course, it's living on demand right now on a lot of streaming services. But in addition to that, we had a conversation, Clark, Lovell, myself, with our distributor, and this was really, Billy can maybe talk a little bit about this, because I know he was one of the first people to say, hey, what about a drive-in tour? And I don't know, Billy, what gave you that idea? Because we jumped on that and then started across the country, across the Rust Belt, showing the film. And
I mean, really, Bob, it's just this ever-flowing genius that just comes.
That's right.
Tap off.
We've come to expect it.
I was reading Financial Times, and they were speaking about South Koreans loving their American cinema, but unable to attend theaters. And producers and studios, or I should say the local theater houses, were finding ways to incorporate drive-ins. I hit up Lovell. I said, Lovell, let's get some drive-ins going. People want to see the movie. Let's not let the COVID-19 stop us. And then Bob was wise enough to make it happen. I mean, in a great way, I'll say.
Yeah, it became our summer project that we took this upon ourselves to take it on the road, and really some great experiences. Just not just being able to stream the film to these towns and audiences that really kind of reflected so much of what this town, our fictitious town, our fictional town in Working Man was like, but working class neighborhoods and people, and to see them out and enjoying it, that was a real pleasure for me, and it was an experience we wouldn't have had without the pandemic. So again, we keep coming back to the idea with this movie and the story and the people here today. It's silver linings, right? We've had a lot of them, and continue to experience those.
Bob, maybe just mention where you ended the tour.
Yeah, so I just briefly alluded to this earlier, but we did finish the drive-in tour at McRae Manufacturing, our location, and projected the film on the outside of the wall of the factory. There was nobody left at that point. Brian Miller, the manager who I talked about, who has remained a good friend, came out, opened the doors up for us, let us run electricity, let me take one last look around the factory before it's scheduled for demolition. And we just thought, this is the way to end this tour, show this movie right up against the factory where we shot. And it was really a moving experience.
Right up against the wall of the outside wall of the factory, right?
The outside wall, yeah.
And also too, Bob, one of the things that I find so beautiful as well is that your road trip buddy on this was the brother of your cousin who passed. So I also think it's so special that you got to have that experience with him too, and that he got to see how the film was touching people because he came and visited us on set.
Right.
It was so encouraging and so supportive of you and everything that was going on. I've always found it especially touching that he was the person that you got to have that trip with this summer.
Yeah, it was appropriate, totally appropriate, and to be able to spend that time with him. And he spent quite a bit of time with Talia too.
Yes, because I was very concerned, as were you, in terms of offending him in any way, how to position the death of a child and that loss that family experienced. But, you know, Peter, you said something very interesting in the front end about existentially, you don't know when something can happen or where that walk will take you, or the transitional moments. And one thing that's very beautiful, I think, in Working Man, yes, we all do need a job, but we're at a moment where we know that artificial intelligence is going to take a lot of those jobs. So this is also a moment to prepare with education, right? It's not just knocking a factory down, but it's rebuilding and retooling with new ideas, with education. And in terms, I've just got to say one more thing, but you know what? Hollywood is a factory town, a factory of dreams, and boy, you know, we've felt it as well. So we're all in that same transitional, unknown, and exciting moment of change.
Yep.
And maybe to close us off, and anyone can chime in if you want to answer this, but I'd love if you could share with us one memory you're going to take with you from either filming the movie, a scene that's your favorite.
Don't you dare, Peter. Don't you dare.
In the distribution, just anything that you're going to remember and you want to share with the Palm Springs audience.
I'd just like to start to say, you know, again, we had a very small budget, and I mean, there were so many wonderful moments in this whole process, and there continue to be wonderful moments. But I have to say that of all the movies I've been involved in, this one gave me probably one of my most favorite jobs, not only to produce this movie, but also to drive Billy, Peter, and Talia to the set every day from the hotel, because we didn't really have drivers that could do that. And it was so lovely because we would all pile into my little car, and then we would drive out to the factory, and we would have such a lovely conversation every morning. And it was just such an awesome way to start the day. So one of my best jobs in Hollywood was being the cast driver.
Yeah, I got to second that, to have your executive producer pick you up every morning. Go to get a set. That does not happen.
It was fun.
You know, with Pete and Talia, you know, on the ride, and we got donuts and protein shakes, little music and talking shop, and Pete's telling stories, and he's not short on stories. So it was a pretty kick-ass experience. You know, 5:30 in the morning, 6:15 in the morning, 5 in the morning is great.
I know, and we're going to do a part 2.
Lord
No.
willing.
I would say for me, I have to say it was so exhilarating to see Bob have this moment from the first day through to our last, of having worked for over a decade to and strive to make this feature, and watching him kind of step into this role as kind of the captain of our ship was really inspiring, and a very easy person to get behind and support. I think for me, the one thing that I'll always take away from this film was it was the first time that my parents had ever had a chance to visit me on set while I was working. And one of the reasons why I had accepted the film in the first place was that it had reminded me so much of them, because my dad has a hazardous waste trucking company, and very much when I was growing up, I was always around industrial spaces because of his work. And so walking into that factory and kind of feeling those smells, feeling all those things that I remembered so viscerally from my childhood, and kind of having those marry with where my own professional life went, was it definitely was I'm not sure I'll be able to replicate that in the same way again. And being able to have that day on set with my mother talking to Talia when we had watched Rocky together when I was a kid, and having my mother just being all over Billy because she was just obsessed with how to get away with murder. And Peter and my dad are only 2 days apart in age. So it was really just this kind of beautiful synthesis. Having Clark there when he was the person who literally gave me my start in the industry, and just kind of having all these influences come together was a real gift that I'm very grateful for.
That's great. I have too many memories to drag out. I mean, I'll never forget the moment before we went into Billy's house, to Walter's house, for the dinner that he made. In fact, that was, did we get to eat much of that dinner? Because that was a really great looking dinner. I mean, it was just phenomenal. Who the hell is this guy that envisioned what he can do with plastics? He can also cook like that. But I just love the moment before, when Talia and I were waiting outside the door, waiting for that door to open. And it felt like I don't know, like Talia was not only my wife, but also my sister. And I fell in love with her all over again. You know, but we had some pretty wonderful moments, crashing golf carts into the sides of the walls of the factory, and just all of those wonderful cast members that whenever a scene would happen with Benny or with Patrice or with everybody, the nurse that comes out of Walter's room up in the rehab, all she had was like a 10-second moment, and it's just a beautiful moment. So I'm all about all of those people. I just fell in love with them. It just was. Do you remember that moment when that nurse comes out and she says, "Don't take too long this time. Don't stay too long," or something, and I don't even say anything, and she gives me a side eye that is like, just, I'll be after you. I know it. She's just terrific. Just terrific.
No, Shanisha Davis, who is back to Chicago. Like we found out from one of the other actors when she was on set, they're like, she's theater royalty, right? She's like the queen of Chicago theater. And we were like, well, we're just thrilled to have her here. And like, she was such a delight. I mean, Peter loved her.
Yeah, right. No,
it's
such a pleasure.
I can offer just a couple quick things, Lily, because we do appreciate all your time and everything Palm Springs has done for us. As a first-time filmmaker, everything was so brand new for me, and all these, I was the rookie. Everyone else here had numerous projects to their credit and so forth. Every day was that sort of new and remarkable, memorable experience. But I do think back to a couple instances, and we had a couple big dinners that involved all these people here. One very early, and then as I recall, there was one later, and I just remember taking stock at a couple moments just to kind of look around and assess just how far this project had come, and really, again, the gratitude I had and still have for everyone involved. And I guess it's some of the littlest things that you remember the most, right?
Well, thank you all so much for your time and also for sharing this film with us. I can't wait to watch it again with all these little tidbits, and that's what's so wonderful about Q&As, that you get to enjoy it even more the second time around. So thank you so much, and congratulations. And
thank you, Lily. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Lily.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lily.
Good to see you guys.
Bye.
Take care.
Thanks.
See you,
Bye-bye.
Billy.
See you.
See you, Lovell. See you, Clark.
Palm Springs.
Bye, guys.
See you, Bobby.
Bye-bye.
What's the button?